Hi, Misha here, and this is a project that I actually started a couple of years ago and then got some went through and then kind of aborted. We're going to pick back up with troopers from Star Wars. I was going to really originally do Stormtroopers, and then I realized you couldn't just do them in the series. But what I want to do, and some videos will be much longer than others, is try to make more smaller videos instead of one ginormous. Although we'll probably do a supercut at the end. And we're out here at the cabin. Last time I kind of tinkered with a few setting up things. Peanut is here with me, although it's still daytime, so she's not as active. We'll see if she pops in and kind of go from there. And we did look at the basic Phase 1, Phase 2 clones, ARC Troopers. Probably will touch back on them in this series, but we're going to begin with the original Stormtrooper, the original Buckethead. First seen in, of course, Star Wars: A New Hope. This series will be mostly canon, and not so much talking about the 6-inch Black Series figures themselves. I'm not really a toy reviewer. I just like them as example pieces. I'll have a little head canon thrown in where applicable, and a little bit of real-world stuff. Basically, whatever the heck I want. This video will probably be a little longer because we're getting started, but we'll go on from there and there, kind of cover various things, just having some fun. I brought all the little troopers out to the cabin. I keep them in a big tote, so that was easy enough to do. And I have 3, including the original mold from the Black Series used for almost 10 years, and then the newer mold introduced in 2020 for like the Mandalorian and such. And we'll start with the basic Stormtrooper. This, I believe, is what was referred to as the Stormtrooper Commander from The Force Unleashed, so it might have some markings. But it's basically your just regular mold, A New Hope style, with the belt holster for his E11. Of course, he's got a different blaster in his hands we'll get to. But first, for those who don't know, yeah, the Stormtroopers, of course, did grow out of the Clone Troopers, but not directly. There were a couple of intermediate steps, including the TK Troopers, and even you could consider the Purge and Shock Troopers, which we'll touch on. But they were already developing these by 18 BBY, before the Battle of Yavin, and they were really solidified before 14 BBY. And believe it or not, Stormtroopers, despite all the memes, are considered elite soldiers of the Imperial Army. They're not under the Navy directly, they're under the Army. And basically you had a squad of 10 men as normal, and then you would have a platoon, which was 5 squads, and from there it just multiplied by 4s. 4 platoons would become a company, and a battalion and regiment and legion was the largest kind of group, and that was commanded by an army general. Typically a legion was between 10 and 13,000 men. Strengths would vary a little bit, but uniformity was kind of the name of the game with these troopers. And they were meant to be the heavy hitters of the Empire. But, you know, the clones were meant to go up as an army against droids and separatists. These were not meant for that. They were meant for occupation of worlds, police actions, riot actions. So that actually is very apparent in their armor and weaponry, and it kind of explains some of the outright shortcomings when they started fighting other military type forces like the rebel scum. Let's move over to the newer mold now, which isn't that new anymore really. I mean, it's 4 years old. Notice there's no holster on the belt. That's actually correct. You saw more and more without the holsters by Return of the Jedi, and kind of goes from there. The armor was based on the clone armor, which was initially based on what came from Camino, but it has 18 plates instead of 20. There is an insulated body glove and a whole new helmet, although it is based on the Phase 2 style. And the idea was more protection against the environment and kinetic things. The Phase 2 Clone Trooper armor was better against energy, but the Stormtrooper armor was better against heat, cold, and all that. The body glove was quite good at being insulated, and it was more airtight like Phase 1 armor, including having a very small oxygen supply in the backpack here for emergency use, so it was technically airtight. And it also had a small power unit for the systems. The plates were held on. They were not so much proof against lethal blaster as they were knives, slug throwers, in other words, traditional guns, and stun pulses, that kind of thing. So they're actually better at that. The utility belt, Batman, held rations, a grappling cable, water rations, a couple of med kits. It also held the thermal detonator over the butt. Fun fact, in the real world, this was originally meant to be a lightsaber holder, which you can really see. Once you know that, it's kind of hard to unsee it. But it was kind of retconned into a grenade carrier. And because these are meant more for police actions, crowd control, they also carried handcuffs and a scrambler, de-scrambler for locks, things of that nature, more police stuff. So the Stormtrooper, while absolutely Army military, also served as a de facto police force, which really goes to show you why you don't want the military also being your police. Yeah, bad things don't happen. The helmet itself actually had polarized lens filters and could interface with the scope on the weapon. It was a 4-layered design, an outer layer for kind of just kinetic protection. Then there were a couple of inner layers for protection against more EMP type things and energy. And then in the innermost layer was insulation cushioning for the head. It had an IFF transponder in there. It had communications, a vocalizer, which is quite famous now, and it had air filters. This was NBC protected. It could filter out quite a bit of chemical, biological contaminants and give a constant air supply. Again, these were really focused on, yes, Peanut has now joined us. Hello, Peanut. It was really focused on protecting the soldiers because these were meant to be standardized and unified across an entire galaxy and many, many environments. And that would carry over to their weapon here, the very famous E11, also known as the standard Imperial blaster carbine. Here's the other modern mold one. If you get into Black Series, you'll just kind of end up accumulating various Stormtroopers over time. The E11 was designed by Blastech, and it was based on the DC-15S Clone Trooper carbine, which itself was a truncated version of the DC-15A. The A had some trouble with overheating and rapid fire, and the S did better, but the E11 did best of all. It was meant to be rapid fired quite a bit without overheating. It also had built-in sting and stun settings, again more for riot control or prisoner capture respectively. Like the DCs before it, the standard energy pack held 100 shots, although there were extended versions, and actually the mold here has a slightly longer power pack. They could do up to 500. Instead of Tabana gas, they use a type of plasma. There's also an optional glow rod flashlight attachment and other things. It did have a folding stock, although we never really see them deployed. They were always, of course, folded up. That acts as a foregrip. And it did have a up to 2 power standard magnified optic that does interact with the helmet, and additional optics could be put on to make it into a DMR. As it is with this optic, it was rated out to about 300 meters and designed to engage targets at about 100 meters or less, which again makes perfect sense for a more urban environment. It was also designed so that it could be used more or less safely in spaceships, space stations, whereas some of the previous guns like the DC-15A would blast holes in the walls. So that was their standard equipment. 4 extra power cells were carried on the belt. They had the thermal detonator or other grenades over the butt. And while these were designed and produced by Blastech, they absolutely could not make enough for the entire galaxy, so they were subcontracted and licensed out to many, many other manufacturers. It was a standard weapon. It was designed where it could work in a vacuum. On the other hand, it did need rather regular cleaning and maintenance. It was simple to use. Some loved it, some hated it. It had a very mixed bag reputation. But when you consider it was produced in the tens, hundreds, millions, it was okay. Did okay. It wasn't too heavy, under 3 kilograms, and was relatively compact. Of course, real world, it was based on the Sterling submachine gun, the Mark IV. And we'll try it this way. Why not? It was good enough for the Stormtroopers. At least in A New Hope. Later on, by Return of the Jedi, you see other guns. You'll see the Canadian C1 sometimes used, and then newer films, like including this one here, were actually based on airsoft replicas, S&Ts, but that's just because of CGI versus blank fire. And that was the standard weapon, but it wasn't the only one the Bucketheads used. Another common, although not nearly as frequently seen weapon in the hands of Stormtroopers was also from Blastech, the DLT-20A, sometimes called the Long Blaster or laser rifle. This was more of a direct replacement for the DC-15A, meant to address some of its issues, and it appeared either very, very late in the Clone Wars or early in the Empire. And while it did weigh more than double the weight of the E11 and did not have as many shots, about 50, it traded off with having 50% more range, better fire, more accurate. It could fire in semi and full auto, more powerful bolts, and a more advanced optic that was detachable, replaceable, and it was meant to be used two-handed pretty much all the time. It was just a more powerful gun, and so it was really popular with folks out on the plains, in the deserts more. It was more popular with scouts, recon units. Again, it did weigh some, but the trade-off was you had longer, more accurate, more consistent shots, and for various situations it was worth it. And we see this in the original trilogy, certainly by Empire Strikes Back, and it was kind of a chunk together gun. It's not exactly a copy of anything or based on anything, although there's some MG42, maybe some Sturmgewehr 44. There's a shroud from a Browning 1919 on it, and other just kind of handmade parts. By the way, the scopes on the E11 were actually taken mostly from Sherman tanks, for those that didn't know. But that was another very often seen blaster in the hands of Stormtroopers. And while they were meant to be very standardized troops, they were customized and trained specifically for various environments. Sorry, the old mold here. It's an always stand. And so we will see variations in different guns, but that's kind of a story for another video. But that, yeah, let me know what you think. Like I said, I plan on doing a few of these and trying to make them as streamlined as possible. And the basic Stormtrooper, I mean, it's as iconic as anything else in Star Wars. And I like how it all kind of connects together. And the reason I have two of the newer mold out is because this one, which I actually bought very cheap, is one of the very few with a removable helmet. And of course, I'm talking about the George Lucas one. There's also a version with Luke under the helmet. Kind of neat, I thought. Why not? But I don't think we'll be seeing a Kathleen Kennedy figure with her head under the helmet. Maybe I'm wrong. But yeah, I picked that up for like $12 years ago and thought, yeah, for that, why not? It's kind of neat. The original Stormies, part 1 of this, whatever series it ends up being, because it'll be a long one. But let me know what you think. Again, I'm not a toy reviewer, not really my deal, and I could go into a lot more detail, but it's fiction. We're just here to have fun, trying to do this new thing. So any feedback is much appreciated. But your basic Stormtrooper evolved, I should say, from the TK series, and they go all the way past the Battle of Endor, and of course into the post period with the Imperial Remnant and all of that, and into the Mandalorian. For all the stuff, they were actually considered elite, and often were considered elite troops and behaved as accordingly. But of course, the villain troops are disposable bad guys, faceless bad guys, and that's how films work. This is Misha and Miss Peanut, and we'll catch you very soon next time.